Cool. Well, Jonathan, it's wonderful to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out
Thank
today.
you. Yeah.
So let's begin our journey into your work by asking you this. 5 years ago, this pandemic changed everything for all of us. So many
Yeah.
levels of our life. How did you get through that era, and how has it influenced the way that you do things today?
Gosh, it's interesting because in my case, the pandemic really boosted my business because right at the time, right before the pandemic, I started to really emphasize YouTube as a platform to connect with my audience, to generate leads for my business from that perspective. And literally, within months of the pandemic, people were trapped at home. And my point is literally within months, my views, my subscribers just started to take off. So for the next 3+ years, for the most part, the pandemic was my friend from that vantage point.
So let me ask you this. If I put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds at career day to school, I know
Yeah.
on paper what you're doing for a living, but if the kid's like, hey, what do you do for a living? How do you answer them?
Yeah, so I never thought about it from that vantage point. I would probably just start with my opening line. I'm a dating and relationship coach for people in midlife, and I characterize midlife as after baby making years and before retirement. I predominantly work with women. And one of the mediums I use to connect with people is YouTube. And, I know a 12-year-old understands YouTube.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of interesting because I've been rather successful with YouTube. And my son, who's a millennial, like looks at his boomer dad and says, how is it a boomer is doing so well on a platform that's really designed for the 12-year-old, the millennials, and that sort of thing. So, I mean, that's the way I'd characterize it to a 12-year-old.
What did you want to be at 12 years old? What was your dream gig?
Gosh, I was thinking about this. Was it an astronaut? I mean, right at that time, I was raised right during the moon landing.
Yeah.
So I was 7 years old at that time. Was it seven, 7 or 8? And or 6 or 7, excuse me. And so, I mean, I think I wanted to be an astronaut for a good part of my life. Star Trek, excuse me, was a big show. Always been into sci-fi. So, you know, that's what I wanted to be.
So take me back to where you were born and raised. What were these seeds of becoming a life coach, honing in on relationships, helping people get to that next step in their lives? How did all of this evolve into who you are today?
Well, that's an interesting story because I was raised in the 60s and 70s and from parents that had a script for me. It was like go to college, get a job, meet someone, get married, buy a house, start a family. So that was the programming. And I chose insurance sales as my profession, let me rephrase that. I landed into that. I didn't actually choose it.
Yeah.
Um, and at the time I met my wife, I was successful. I was able to be the primary breadwinner, but I wasn't that conscious of a human being. I wasn't a good husband. I was really more focused, so hyper focused on that provider protector narrative, trying to climb the corporate ladder, that I was really unconscious to the relationship and even being a good parent. And in 2005, my now ex-wife, asked for a divorce. And right at the time I was going through divorce, I lost my high-end corporate job, making well over $250,000 a year. And I mean, literally the same month. And then the market crash of 2008, and
Wow.
my identity was pummeled.
Yeah.
I mean, my absolute identity of who I was pummeled. And for the next 5 years, I used to go to bed wishing I didn't wake up. And I'll be candid with everyone listening. I mean, I did drugs, alcohol, and online dating was one of my self-medication tools, meaning connecting with people on. And by the way, online dating back in 2005, 2006, 2007 was still kind of the Wild West,
Yeah.
if you will. And social media just started to get launched around that time. And I got immersed with, you know, I got immersed with that form of connectivity. And let me explain something in this particular case. when I said it was my drug of choice, online dating, I was communicating with women predominantly all over the country, talking, I mean, communicating via email, text
Yeah.
message, that sort of thing. And I think I was doing it as a replacement to therapy. In other words, connecting with people was filling that void inside of me. But, you know, what I learned along the way is, I was operating from a place of I need someone to love me so I can feel good about myself. And for the next 5 years, I was immersed in that, recognizing that I wasn't getting any more fulfilled from these connections. And that's when I began a path of personal development, self help, spiritual work, and therapy to really kind of answer those questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What's it all for?
So what was the moment that you knew that you were going to be a life coach? When did that calling become this career that you have now?
You know, it was little bits and pieces that got me there. I connected with I actually dated someone who was a high-end life coach back in 2007 is when I met her. And I got a taste of the world, behind the screen, behind the Wizard of Oz's curtain kind of thing. And in that moment, I got a peek of it. And then I believe it was 2009, 2010, I just made a decision. I said, I'm just going to become a dating and relationship coach with really no experience other than just sharing my point of view. And I began starting with helping women online just improve their online dating profiles. That's how I started. Just, hey, pay me X amount of dollars and I'll help make your profile more attractive to a guy because it's coming from the male perspective. So it wasn't an exact like this. It was like built over a little bit of time.
It's interesting. I'll interview a lot of coaches that help people in relationships in the age group you're talking about, after
Yeah.
you've had kids and you're in midlife. And I always usually find that it's women counseling women. I rarely find men that have more of a focus on women. How has that evolved and how do they respond to you being male? Is there any kind of thing that needs to be decoded prior to that?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I've observed certainly that women oftentimes give advice to women. My approach was getting inside a guy's head, talking to somebody who's been through divorce, alimony, child support, visitation rights, erectile dysfunction, elderly parents in assisted living facilities, because I focused on that midlife demographic. And I'm saying, look, I can help you get inside of what's going inside a man's mind. Now, here's the thing about women, and this is just maybe a generalization, maybe even a stereotype. Women oftentimes want to try to figure out men in relationships.
Uh-huh.
Men, if I was coaching men, all they want to know is, how do I meet a woman? They focus on how to meet the woman. A woman wants to understand the way a man operates. I mean, that's generalized in some degree. So I was filling that need, answering questions like why are men commitment phobic? What does it take for a man to fall in love? Those types of questions. And and the other piece of it, Joe, was when I'm speaking to a woman, I could look at her blind spots from a male perspective. Women are beautiful creatures that are so complementary to one another,
Yeah.
and sometimes there's not as the same objectivity. My coaching is called heart-centered radical honesty. It's direct, a little tough love, a lot of heart. And I mean, and I'd give some objective perspective that isn't candy coated. And I think what happened was for in the beginning of my career, women really began to appreciate that.
See, it makes sense to me that a man would be talking to women more because there's all these trade secrets. I think we need to
Yeah.
figure each other out. Like I was talking to a romance novelist last week and I was like, if guys would read a few romance novels to get kind of an idea of how that works, like I really love really good female authors. There's a level of
Yeah.
me that can understand how the female brain works, and it almost seems like on your end the women want to know, how does the male brain work, because at the end of the day we are on two vastly different planets operating and coming
Yeah.
together.
Oh, that's and you know, the challenge is we've been, particularly for us baby boomers, Gen Xers, we were raised with such a fantasy type narrative, you know, whether it's, you know, Cinderella, you know, movies like The Notebook, that there's this belief that love should just be easy and it should just fall into your lap and you deserve it. And what I believe humans are now beginning to recognize that if you want to be in a life partnership, then it starts by becoming the best version of yourself, you know, and I call that, in the concept of my book, which is right behind me for those that are watching the video, I, you know, it's self-love. And sadly, we have a population of human beings that are wounded from their childhood, and their adult lives, and they're not really operating from a place of self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-reliance, and they're seeking relationship as the, you know, you complete me piece. And if you want to attract an awesome relationship, it starts with the awesome relationship within yourself.
And at the end of the day, though, when we get out of high school or college, we're
Yeah.
always historically bad at relationships and money. It's something
Yeah.
that's not taught, it's something you have to learn. So, from your experience, does it just take time for us to figure this out? Because lots of us get divorced, lots of us go through heartbreak. Is it just the natural cycle of life for us to get to that midlife place and be like, what the hell happened? And then maybe you can start reassessing what you need.
Well, this is a great question. And, you know, to some degree, depending on what children are what they've experienced from their childhood, you know, my son, who's 29 years old, and most of his friends are byproduct of divorce. So within that, I mean, a significant percentage of my son's friends come from that environment. And there's not enough studies around the fact that divorce is an emotionally traumatic experience, not just for the couple going through it, but everybody around them. And also, there's a displacement of resources that happen. And oftentimes, young people aren't really educated on, you know, the understanding of what money represents, how it's generated, that sort of thing. In particular, being really witnessing role models of couples that are in a healthy, happy relationship. So, you know, unless they begin a journey, like I said, of personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy, they're going to keep relive. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
So, who's been your hero? Who's been your inspirational force that's allowed you to evolve into this profession and define where you're at on the planet now?
Oh gosh, I mean, where do I begin? You know, when I think back, the first book that really awakened me was the book "You Can Heal Your Life" by Louise Hay. And I remember, you know, that it used to be called metaphysics, was, you know, new age spirituality and that sort of thing. She certainly was the kicked it off for me. Then the movie The Secret came out, and I was like, all the people that were in the movie The Secret, I'm like, oh my God, that resonates, that resonates, that resonates. And then, you know, Wayne Dyer, Ram Dass, Michael Singer wrote the book The Untethered Soul, which I just love. Certainly Tony Robbins is in that group, you know, from that, you know, that take charge kind of energy and, you know, like pound your chest kind of thing. I mean, I've gone to Tony Robbins seminars. Gosh, it's not just one person per se. I mean, it's just a litany of people that I admire. And what I'm mostly looking for is who speaks from the heart.
Yeah.
Like that's like lately, that's at least for the last 6 months, I'm like, who do I want to learn from? And I'm really paying attention. Are they just selling me a course, or are they speaking from their heart?
Yeah. You know, the backbone to literature, music, movies, all of it is a love story. What's your
Yeah.
favorite love story?
God, you know, this is going to be corny, so effing corny. So, growing up in the late 70s, there was a TV show called Heart to Heart,
Uh-huh.
and it was with Robert Wagner and Stephanie Powers. And I mean, I just loved the way they operated as teammates, the way they operated with love with one another. By the way, the actors who played it had great on-screen chemistry.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of the Netflix series today called Nobody Wants This, with Adam Brody and Kristen Bell.
Yeah.
I think I'm pronouncing her name properly. And they have just great chemistry on screen for two people that are in, with other people in their lives. But that show really resonated with me because they were a couple that operated like a teammate with one another. Now, it's kind of a little corny. I mean, how is it every week they're solving a murder?
Huh?
This is a wealthy industrialist and a debutante. Like, how is it that they had the speed dial of the homicide detective in Los Angeles? I mean, a little bit, like you might go, God, we really attract a lot of murder in our life. But and the thing is what I liked about them, they also were solving a puzzle. And what I believe, when couples operate from a place of curiosity, like, how do we solve this puzzle, this thing called life, this thing called relationship, and come at it from a curious mind? My beloved says, people who are not curious lack imagination. And curiosity didn't kill the cat. It created so much juice and joy in one's life. I believe people that operate from a place of curiosity.
So, as a coach, you're dispensing your level of wisdom, your level of experience, and you're helping people get to a better place. But
Yeah.
in the course of that, you're learning from your clients. There's all these shared experiences as human beings that we have that we learn from.
Yeah.
What have you learned over the years of being a coach that's been unexpectedly revelatory for you in your development as a human, as someone that's in relationships? What's happened over those years?
Yeah, it's interesting. As I think of the word coach, I really think of myself when I'm working with someone as a confidant, a person that, someone that they can talk to, someone they can bounce ideas off from. I mean, to the extent that I dispense some perspective, both based on what I've learned. And just for the record, I've amassed over 20,000 hours of coaching. I've done over 3,000 hours of personal development workshops, trainings, books, that sort of thing. So, I mean, I come at it from a place of schooling myself. But as you brought up, it's interesting when I'm working with a client and they're sharing something, I'm like, oh, that's me. And then the next hour I talk to someone, I go, no, that's me. Like, in other words, when I believe when humans recognize that everyone around us is just an extension of ourselves, if we learn in their story, when we hear, now it may not be the exact circumstance like a thumbprint, but there's a thread. And I think the core thread is, to some degree, we humans want to feel like they belong. They want to feel safe. They want to feel connection. They want to feel seen, heard, understood, and sadly, oftentimes there aren't enough confidants, because we used to be raised in tribes and environments where wisdom was dispelled down. Now you have to go seek it out. Um, and thankfully, there are wonderful coaches out there that are offering perspective that can really make a difference in a person's life.
What is it that gets you up every day to do this work? Because obviously, getting into people's lives, you're having to walk into a whole host of things. But you have a soul that you have to protect and you have to nurture. You have a job
Yeah.
that you have to do at a high level. What is that motivation for you every day to collectively put that energy out there?
It goes back to what I was sharing earlier about being curious. I am always dissecting how we human my strong interest is centered around human pair bonding, psychology, philosophy, that sort of thing, particularly how we mate with one another. I'm always slicing that loaf of bread, if you will, every morning, thinking, how can this be better? And that's what motivates me. I witness so much dysfunctionality within human beings, and yet I believe dysfunctionality is how the contrast of what doesn't work for us creates the opportunity to make choices that and when I say work for us, feels like a harmonious frequency. Um, and I love just offering perspective. By the way, it's interesting, Joe. I was witnessing with a client the other day. I completely projected and gave her, I don't want to say bad or wrong advice, but a perspective that didn't resonate with her. But what was interesting is in that pushback from her, she found her answer. So, in other words, instead of giving you the answer, I gave her the opposite. I mean, and when I say opposite, a thing that created a little bit of friction for her, but allowed her to find her, her, what's the word I'm looking for? Her center through the contrast. And I kind of have a gift of doing that.
So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight and you walked into a room in a house, maybe your childhood house, and you ran in to like the 12, 13-year-old version of you, and you could show that version of you a coffee table book of your life, of how it's worked out, what you're doing right now, how you've evolved to this point, would that version of you believe it?
Would the 13-year-old believe it?
Yeah.
Oh, I highly doubt it. I mean, it's interesting because what I've learned is that we're going to fall down lots and lots of times. The fantasy is that everything is supposed to be smooth sailing and operate, at like maximum efficiency, joy, and happiness. Not that that can't be achieved, by the way. Um, at the same time, it is learning. What I've learned in this experience, and particularly from falling down, is that to trust that I'm always getting back up. Like I mean, I've every time I've fallen down my life, I've gotten back up, and it's just trusting when something's uncomfortable. It's going, okay, good luck, bad luck, who knows? Just trust that this is an experience, and learning that emotions is how we navigate life. So, I believe our souls came here to experience every type of emotion out there. So, coming back to your question, no, I'm sorry, I'm going off on
Oh,
a
no, you're good.
tangent. I don't think my 13-year-old would comprehend it. But the reason being is if I gave all the answers at 13,
Yeah.
I don't think I would have learned what I needed to learn.
Yeah, for sure. So, as a life coach, if you were to walk into a room of all the clients, everyone that you've worked with over the
Yeah.
years, and you could swim through that room of people to a podium and tell them one fun story, maybe the first concert you went to, jumping out of an airplane, climbing a mountain, a wonderful experience, a fun story that would humanize you a little bit to that group, what would be a fun story you would tell that room?
I mean, I would start with my pain, you know, um, not that it's fun, but the gift of going through what I just shared with you, that crash in 2005, going to bed wishing I didn't wake up, and then having this almost passion or dream to want to help people, a lot helped me wake up as a human being for myself. And 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 if I had to encapsulate the lesson that I learned, is at least for me, is the lesson of loving myself and everyone else. Like, what does it mean to love? What would love do? How would love operate? That's the way I attempt to live my life every single day, from a place of love. I know it sounds corny, particularly for men saying this and everything, but at the same time, that frequency of love I've learned is heaven
Yeah.
versus the frequency of fear, which is hell in my mind. So,
Yeah. So, of everything you've accomplished and more importantly evolved to at this point in your life, what are you the proudest of?
God, I mean, I wanted to say my kids or something like that, but their mom did more of the heavy lifting. What am I most proud of? You know, I'm proud of myself, and let me explain why. And I have a son who passed away 7 years ago, and weeks before he passed away, we were having lunch. Oh, I was with both my boys, excuse me. We were having lunch, and they remember their dad when he crashed. I mean, was I literally was destined. I mean, I was literally practically living out of a suitcase kind of thing. And by the way, they were raised in a multi-million-dollar home when I was married, and I'm literally not quite the gutter, but felt like it. And then I built this business from scratch, from nothing. Like you don't go to school to become a dating or relationship coach. I mean, this is something you fall into. And now I have several 100,000 followers on social media, or on YouTube, I should say. I'm recognized in the one of the top tiers of dating relationship coaches in my genre. And I remember my sons looking at me and they said, Dad, we remember when you were like down and out. And now you have a beautiful place on the beach. You drive at the time I was driving a sports car, not, I don't have that anymore. I don't have that ego drive like I used to, but you build something from nothing. And what I'm most proud of is that my boys saw that. They acknowledged it, that
Mhm.
they could embrace it, embody it. That's what I'm most proud of.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
It's interesting because people that knew me when I was younger, they see me as that, myopic, self-centric person that only cared about himself. People who meet me today, I'd like to think that they see a person that comes from a place of heart. And the way I look at myself is, and again, this is something that's not easy for me to do, to operate from a place of love. When I say it's not easy, I have fears, insecurities, doubts, limiting beliefs. And yet I do my best every morning to wake up and to erase those scripts I was raised with, and that unconscious way of being, and start breaking through to a place of love. That's what I hope people see in me.
So if anyone wants to get self-love, tune into your YouTube channel, hire you, questions, any of the good business, where do they go?
Well, my name is listed right here, Jonathon Aslay. Just simply cut and paste it, put it in Google. My YouTube will be the first thing that comes up. My website will be the second thing comes up. Watch some videos, subscribe. If you want to connect with me, you just click that, schedule a coaching call with me, and we'll see if I can make a difference in your life.
Okay, I will put all those links in the show notes. Jonathon, thank you so much for a wonderful story. I appreciate your time. Best of luck with everything.
Likewise, Joe. Thank you. This has been fun.
Absolutely. Thank you.